Welcome back to the Fit Minute Podcast, where we talk all things health, fitness, and lifestyle. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome back. I'm your host, Gabby Mazur, and on today's episode, I have Dr. Michael Biamonte. He is the founder of the Biamonte Center for Clinical Nutrition and the co-creator of BioCybernetics and the author of the Candida Chronicles, which highlights Candida's history, causes, symptoms, and most importantly, how the problem can be solved. So welcome to the show, Dr. Biamonte. How are you today?
Thank you very much. I'm very good. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah. So I love talking about nutrition. I love talking about gut health. We're also going to discuss a little bit about thyroid health and wellness today. So, but before we get started, let's talk a little bit about you, who you are, your history in nutrition, and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I started studying nutrition back in 1980, and I started studying naturopathic medicine back then too. We really didn't have any schools at that time for naturopathy, not like we have it now, because you can go to most major colleges now and study clinical nutrition and naturopathy. When I came up, it was during what we would call the dietitian wars that were taking place in New York. The dietitians back in the 80s wanted to take the title clinical nutritionist and use it for themselves and make it exclusive. And they also didn't want anyone to give nutritional advice. For instance, like chiropractors, massage therapists, people who work in health food stores, they didn't want anybody to give any kind of advice except for themselves. And we had a long, hard-fought battle that then Governor Cuomo actually broke up. And he then determined that nutritionists like myself should be called clinical nutritionists, and dietitians had to keep their title. And so he separated us out and licensed us in New York. And that was the end of the wars. So that's where I came up through, back in those days of Adele Davis, Carlton Fredericks, people like that. So it was quite different than it is now. Now kids can get a degree in clinical nutrition in most colleges. You can do it online. It wasn't that way when I came up, but it's a good thing, you see, because if the handfuls of nutritionists back then didn't fight this battle, we wouldn't have what we have now in terms of the technology.
Yeah, I think nutrition was looked at very differently as well. And I don't think that we realized how much what we put into our bodies, what we eat, affects disease and obviously Candida or gut health, and how gut health affects diseases as well. So I think that nutrition has become such a huge thing that we now realize affects us so tremendously, when I think that it wasn't taught. You know, dietitians were taught a specific way, doctors were taught
dietitians were taught how to make up menus
right
for people in institutions, how to order X amount of Jell-O, X amount of instant mashed potatoes for people in institutions. They weren't taught clinical application of nutrition.
Right.
It was more political back in the 80s. It was very political. And when all that was over, then the science of it was able to actually grow and bloom to where people could do studies without being attacked and without having to worry about being put in jail for practicing medicine without a license.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's very interesting how it's developed over time, and what we now know and what we can teach to people to understand their bodies and understand what they're putting into their bodies to really create wellness and have a healthier lifestyle altogether. Especially when it comes to our gut health, I think that's become such a huge thing that we didn't really realize was so important.
That's true.
You know, talking about that, let's talk about Candida. What exactly is Candida for people that don't know, and why did you decide to specifically write a book about this?
When many years ago, when I first got out of school, I was working at Grumman Aerospace on a project for NASA. The project was to develop a computer model of the human body that would be able to test the astronauts' blood and hair samples and things like this to be able to tell what supplements they needed to take while they were in the space station for deep space or long space expeditions. And we eventually took that model and went public with it and had many doctors using it. And the model worked great in terms of balancing blood chemistries and all these things, but there was about 30% of the people that we were using it on who had crazy reactions. And we found that these people had had a history of crazy reactions to medications and vitamins and supplements and whatnot. So I volunteered to find out what was wrong with these people. And I eventually found out that they had Candida. And I didn't really know what Candida was. I had to look it up and see what it was. But that's what the tests were telling me they had. So I was so naive as to tell the people to go to their medical doctors and tell them that they had Candida and to get cleared of it and then come back to us. So it went through a whole evolution of realizing that the best in my profession didn't know how to handle it, and people had a really high relapse rate. So I got very curious, and I decided to devote myself to unraveling what Candida was all about. I initially found out it was a fungus that lived in your intestinal tract. It was normal to have it there, but it was supposed to be a minor part of your biome. And then I found out that as a fungus, it could also convert itself to a yeast at will, which is called dimorphic, means being able to live in two different states. So the same fungus, which can live in your colon, can become a yeast infection that a woman might have vaginally. So the more I started to study this, the more interested I got. And I started to make some major breakthroughs by listening to my patients and by reverse engineering what they were telling me. So the first major breakthrough I made in understanding, and this is, by the way, why the book is called The Candida Chronicles. It's because it chronicles my journey personally through understanding Candida and being able to debug it and understanding why most practitioners can't get rid of it, why patients continually relapse with it. So I found out that Candida was very mutative and that it easily became drug resistant. And I started to collect books on Candida to the point where they were going up to my ceiling. And anything a patient would tell me, I would go back and hit those books to reverse engineer what they were saying. So when they started telling me that they were on nystatin and felt great for a month or two, and then it all came back harder, that's where I found out that Candida was mutating and it was becoming drug resistant to the nystatin. Then I started to hear from people that the doctor put them on nystatin, acidophilus, coenzyme Q10, fish oil, all of these things, and they felt worse. And it wasn't die-off. They felt worse from the vitamins. So I went back into the textbooks and I found out that there are many nutrients that actually make Candida worse. Because Candida is a living organism, and when you hit it with all types of vitamins, it spreads. It literally feeds the Candida and makes it grow more. Then I heard from people who had mercury toxicity in Candida. And so I studied that aspect of it. So I just kept hitting each aspect of it until I was able to string along a protocol of what the correct do's and don'ts were in handling it and what the order was. So in actual fact, there isn't any mystery because people will hear me on podcasts and they'll email me, what's your product? How can I buy your product? There is no product. There's nothing, there's no secret product I have. What I have is the correct order of how you treat it, what the correct order of in using different medicines or different supplements. And what you don't do very often is more important than what you do. When people take supplements like B complex, coenzyme Q10, vitamin D, those nutrients make Candida worse. They actually cause it to spread. And most practitioners don't know this. When people take antioxidant vitamins, which are great for everybody, and they're treating Candida, the antioxidant vitamin nullifies the effect of the antifungal, which most people don't know. So there's an entire list of do's and don'ts in treating Candida that I discovered, and that's how the book came about, to explain how I figured this out and then what those do's and don'ts are.
So what if someone has Candida, what are some of the symptoms and what are the causes of it?
Well, the causes of Candida essentially are anything that disturb your biome. Because Candida is a normal part of your biome. It exists in all mammals. but it exists in a low amount. And when your biome is disturbed, the Candida grows out of control. That's the problem. And it's primarily Lactobacillus acidophilus species and bifidus species that when they're disturbed, that allows the Candida, triggers it to overgrow. So, and that could be anything. It could be taking antibiotics. It could be having chemotherapy. It could be swimming in a chlorinated pool. It could be drinking too much alcohol. It could be anything that disturbs your biome will cause Candida to overgrow. And the really confusing thing for people is that Candida produces so many symptoms, and the symptoms are so disrelated that a person on their own would never figure this out, or be very difficult to figure out, because Candida causes a multitude of digestive symptoms: bloating, gas, constipation, or diarrhea, IBS symptoms, symptoms of Crohn's, gluten intolerance. It does all that, but on the other hand, it could also cause allergies. It could also make you be chemically intolerant to the point where you can't go to a restaurant or a bar where people wear a perfume and are smoking cigarettes. People with Candida can freak out with headaches from that while they're having these digestive problems. So now how are they going to link that together, and what's that going to mean to them? It doesn't make any sense. Candida can cause eczema. As a matter of fact, I know many doctors who feel that most eczema is caused by Candida. Candida causes Hashimoto's because Candida sets off autoimmune reactions. So if someone gets Candida and then gets leaky gut syndrome, they can move into Hashimoto's or rheumatoid arthritis as the next group of symptoms. While they're having those digestive problems, while they're being chemically intolerant. So it causes a group of symptoms which a person may never connect as all being related.
Yeah.
That's what's fascinating about it.
Yeah. And so with that, I wanted to lead into, because you mentioned Hashimoto's, and you have kind of a guide to thyroid wellness. And I wanted to talk about that because I do myself have Hashimoto's, and thyroid health and wellness, thyroid issues are very prevalent. Probably many of which are due to Candida or due to their people's gut health. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. Can you describe a little bit about what you talk about in your approach to thyroid wellness?
Well, there are three principal doctors that I've learned from about thyroid. And very quickly, when I studied these doctors, I learned that the thyroid specialist on Park Avenue knows nothing. Most thyroid alleged experts understand the blood parameters for thyroid, and then after that point, they're out. They don't know what's going on after that point. So the three doctors that I've studied who've contributed to what I do with thyroid, one is Weston Childs, who has a more unique way of interpreting blood tests for thyroid. He goes out of the box to look at some other parameters that most people don't look at. He looks at about 15 or 16 different parameters. And to give you examples, he heavily looks at reverse T3, and he also looks at insulin, because insulin as a hormone suppresses thyroid activity. So somebody who has chronically high elevated insulin, that's going to downregulate their thyroid. The same thing is true with estrogen and cortisol. They downregulate your thyroid, where DHEA and testosterone and progesterone help your thyroid. They're synergistic with thyroid hormones. So you would never get this data unless you were studying his website and his articles. You wouldn't know about this. But those are things that can be bogging somebody's thyroid problem. The next doctor who I found fascinating was Eric Rind. And Dr. Rind has a website where he teaches you how to use your body temperature to understand your thyroid function. This goes back to a book written, I think it was in the 70s, by a doctor named Rhoda Barnes, who wrote a book called Hypothyroidism, the Unsuspected Illness. And Barnes made a point of saying that many people with functional hypothyroid, have normal blood levels. And Barnes explained you have to use your body temperature to see where you are with your thyroid, because the whole point of your thyroid metabolism is to create heat and energy. So when your body makes T4, converts it to T3, it goes through the Krebs cycle into the electron transport chain, all the stuff you learned in biology in high school. The whole point is for that thyroid hormone to kick off in your mitochondria the production of heat and energy. And if the thyroid isn't adequate, your body temperature won't be adequate. So it's an immediate red flag. Then there's a doctor who actually explained why that was. His name is Dr. David L. Watts. He owns Trace Elements Lab, which is a lab that's been doing hair testing for 40 years. And Dr. Watts explains that there are mineral receptors in your body that help your thyroid hormone enter that whole production of producing heat and energy. And the receptors are calcium and copper and zinc and potassium. So in your body, in your cells, there's a ratio of calcium to copper and zinc and potassium that regulates how well your body utilizes your thyroid hormone. It's there to make sure you don't overutilize or underutilize. And many people who end up being copper toxic or who end up not utilizing the calcium correctly in their body, they end up with high calcium and copper, which then suppresses zinc and potassium and downregulates your thyroid response. So it has nothing to do. This is why I go back to saying the crack I made about Fifth Avenue and these doctors on Park Avenue. They have no clue as to this. They're looking at the blood work. They're not looking at what's happening once the hormone tries to enter your cells and interact with the thyroid receptors. They don't know anything about these ratios with these minerals. So immediately they only can get a certain response. What's for somebody. See?
Well, what I thought was interesting that you talk about in that is that the doctors prescribed Synthroid. I was prescribed Synthroid and took that for about 3 years. And at first I felt like, woo, but my body had been running so low for so long that now I'm getting this jolt of, thyroid hormone that I hadn't had in years. But after maybe 6 months, all of that went away and my symptoms didn't go away. The fatigue was still there. The hypoglycemia was still there. All of the symptoms that I still had were still there. It wasn't solving the problem. It wasn't solving the issue. And then what they wanted to do was just throw more pills at it. So, okay, now we'll give you liothyronine. Now we'll up the dose. Now we'll lower the dose. And I'm like, this isn't working. I don't, it's been years and it's not working. It's not.
See, this is crazy because what you're describing would be the equivalent of somebody who learns how to drive, and the only thing he learns how to control is the brake and the gas pedal.
Right.
He doesn't know how to turn the steering wheel, doesn't know how to move the car in and out of gear. See, they just know speed up or slow down. And what things that they're missing in a case like you're explaining is they're not looking at the mineral pattern in your body that has accumulated or developed over these years that's governing how well your body is converting T4 to T3, and then the effects of T3.
Right.
How if your copper is elevated and your zinc is low, then your body's resistive to thyroid hormone. It's like you have thyroid hormone resistance. We also call it functionally low thyroid because technically, based on the book, if your thyroid hormones are in the right range in your blood, you can't diagnose somebody as being hypothyroid. You have to have some kind of adenum on it. So that's why we say functionally low, because then if we test your body temperatures, your temperatures are probably below 97.8. And a temperature below 97.8 is functionally low thyroid. If you're between 97.8 and 98.2, you're in a gray area, but you've got to be above 98.2 to be considered having a normal temperature for a normal functioning thyroid. And none of this data is being looked at. And now none of the effects of this, which affect your liver, affects your adrenal glands, none of that is being considered either. You see? So there's a lot being left out that it would explain why you're feeling the way you do. Not only that, but then there's also the problem that the reason your body temperature is the way it is and where it is because when your body's generating enough heat, it acts to naturally disinfect your biome of bad organisms. So one of the ways a person also gets candida is by having a low body temperature, which means low thyroid, because you have to have the correct temperature to stop some of these microorganisms from proliferating. And if you don't have a high enough temperature, then these bugs just grow.
Right. Yeah, and my thyroid levels have always been in normal range. So when my thyroid is tested, even today, I've never had thyroid levels out of normal range.
Right,
So, but I still have Hashimoto's. I still have
right.
thyroid issues. I still, so it's interesting, that they diagnose you. And I was not diagnosed by a Western doctor. I was diagnosed by a naturopathic doctor after a couple years of saying, I am sick, this is not normal. So, I think it's very similar to Candida. You have all these symptoms, you don't know what's going on,
Mhm.
and you're trying to figure it out. Same thing. I think you go to a doctor, they try and prescribe you antibiotics or prescribe you something, and it's not solving the problem. It's not fixing whatever your root cause is, whatever the
Well,
root cause of
that's that's
what's happening
unfortunate.
and why it's happening.
It's unfortunate, but that's the way it's all set up.
Right.
It's very deep rooted. What Western medicine is not based on treating causes or correction. In fact, there's an old joke in medical school that you never kill the patients, but you never cure the patients. Because if you kill him or you cure him, you have lost a customer, essentially for the drug companies. Because what medical doctors in many ways are, and don't get me wrong, some of my best friends are medical doctors, but they'll be the first to tell you that they are an extension of a salesman for the drug companies. That's the way they're taught. They're taught to look at symptoms and to give people drugs that suppress symptoms. They're not taught to get to a cause or a cure. In fact, there are many states in this country where it's illegal to say you could cure certain diseases. And our thanks go to John D. Rockefeller, who started this whole mess. John D. Rockefeller, back in the 30s, figured out that he could take the leftover debris from his coal tar dyes and he can convert them into synthetic drugs. And that's how the pharmaceutical industry was born. And then with the money he had, he decided he was going to fund allopathic medical schools and get rid of naturopathic and homeopathic schools. So there you go.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, and I know, especially in my experience, and I have heard it before that, when I did go to my first endocrinologist after being diagnosed, I asked him what I could do to help treat this, what I could do physically, what I could do nutritionally. Nothing, nothing. And I thought, well, that seems ridiculous. Like,
Yep.
that doesn't make
I've heard
any.
medical doctors tell people, don't worry about your elevated
Don't worry
thyroid
about it.
antibodies.
My
There's nothing you can
second
do about it anyway.
my second endocrinologist, when I left that one, the second an endocrinologist said the same thing to me, and I said that makes no sense to me because the lower my antibodies are, the better I feel. So there is a correlation between the two. Yes, they will always be elevated. But that's garbage. I'm sorry, I don't believe that, not for a second. Don't. And then wanted to get me off of the medication that I was on because I switched from Synthroid to Armor Thyroid. And he wanted to take me off of that and get me back on Synthroid. And I said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You are not switching me back. I never felt good on Synthroid. I never felt better. I feel somewhat normal on Armor, but I could do better. I'm not switching back. Absolutely not. And I left after 2 visits to that doctor, I left in tears and never went back to him again either. So yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting battle. It's definitely it's looking at the whole picture because our bodies are very complex, right? And as we've talked about, like what you put in your body is very important. If you're drinking alcohol, if you're eating lots of fast food, if you're not sleeping, the things that you're doing to your body cause, candida and the overgrowth of bacteria. And that's why you have to take care of those things. So I definitely see that there are underlying causes to what create disease. It doesn't just happen. You don't just develop a disease out of nowhere. It's not like, oh, today you have cancer, it grows. There's a cause for all of these things. So if we can figure out what is causing us to be sick, or at least how we can treat it to make us feel better or be optimal, I think that's what's most important.
The problem is we're up against a lot of money.
Well, yes, of course.
Most of this is all money motivated, because when you just said cancer, you have the National Cancer Institute, you have all of these organizations who want you to donate money to them so they can figure out how to cure cancer. And what the cause of cancer is, we've known what causes cancer since the 60s. You can go on the FDA website and look up substances that are known to be carcinogenic, and you'll see a list longer than your arm. So we know what causes cancer. We know it's the exposure to a lot of different toxins. And unfortunately, these toxic things that we're exposed to that cause cancer, most of them are synthetic. They're not organic for the most part. A lot of them are synthetic. And who's making them and why? Well, we go back, then we are introduced to Monsanto,
Yes.
the corporation from hell, which makes so many different products that are on the market that cause cancer, not to even mention their GMO foods that have been banned in Europe. So
Well, you can
there's a lot of money
you can
that we're up
definitely
against.
see. I mean, when you go, I love when you travel to Europe and you look at the ingredients in something and there's four things and all of
Mhm.
them are, oats,
Right.
or, it's like four things, what it is. And even if it is just Quaker oats, it's like Quaker oats. And I mean, granted, a riboflavin and all that. Okay, I know what that, those are, but you have preservatives. Why are we making things so shelf stable that they can last years upon years upon years? And when you're doing that, think about if something is shelf stable on a shelf and you put it into your body. What do you think that does to your body? If it can last on a shelf for a very, very long time and it's preserved on the shelf, how do you think that affects what goes inside your body? It's preserved outside of your body, so it's going to be preserved inside your body. Now you're putting that into you. And I don't think a lot of people consider that here. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because we should really take a look at those things and look at what we eat. I mean, I don't have really anything in my cupboards. Most of the food that I have is in my refrigerator. It's organic, it's perishable, it's something I cook every day because that's what I'm trying to fuel my body with. And it's really sad that you don't know what is in your food.
It's very funny. There was an episode of the Porn Stars from Las Vegas where someone brought in a McDonald's cookie from 1985, and somebody accidentally opened it up, not knowing that it was something that they just bought as a novelty. They started eating the cookie, and the cookie seemed fine to them.
Oh, that's not good. That's really not good.
No,
No. Well, anyway, I guess we could go on and on and on for days about that. But so you have your book, Candida's History, Causes, Symptoms, and importantly, how these things can be solved. So where can you find your book?
Amazon.
Okay, I will post the link to Amazon for that. And is there anything else you want to leave our listeners with today that you think's important?
I think the most important thing for a person who's trying to gain control of their health is first to consider eating all organic and non-GMO. Learn about that. The next thing you want to learn about is your blood type and how you need to correctly eat for your blood type, because each blood type comes from a different region of the world where people have eaten a certain way for thousands and thousands of years. So your body has adapted to that. It would be it would be like taking an Eskimo and bringing him down to the tropics and expecting this Eskimo to live on pineapples and mangoes.
Yeah.
This is a person whose body has adapted to eating raw fish and blubber, and it's just not going to work that way. So you have to
Milk.
understand the validity, right? Yeah, you have to understand the validity of eating correctly for your blood type. Then the next thing is to be careful with supplements. We could do a whole 10 hours on this.
Hmm.
Because if you take supplements without knowing what you're doing, you can create imbalances in your body. It's not true what they say in the health food store that all the vitamins just wash out of your body and it's fine. It's true, they wash out of your body taking a lot of other nutrients with them if you're not taking the right vitamins. So, and I fully believe that in order for people to be healthy, because of the environmental toxicity we have, you have to take supplements. But when you take supplements, you have to be tested to find out what you need and what dosage you need that's correct for you. And you should repeat those tests every 6 months.
Yeah.
So I would say that's the beginner course.
Yeah. I think all those things are very, very important. I think people should definitely take it seriously. And it's for your health, it's for your life, it's living your best self and living well for as long as we can, because you want to prevent illness, you want to prevent those things so that you're living healthy and for as long as you can, living as well as you can.
Hmm.
Not, not living sick and feeling like garbage all the time. That's, nobody wants to live like that. So, well, Dr.
And just
Biamonte,
don't trust the powers that be. Is the other thing I would say.
yes, yes.
If people want some good reading, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has written some great books about the health industry. I would highly recommend his books.
Okay. Well, if they want to read some good books about health, there are a lot out there too. So, you can always find that and read your book as well, learning more about Candida and
Hmm.
their own gut health. So, I appreciate you so much for coming on the show today. So thank you so much for sharing about everything that we talked about today. I really
Well,
appreciate
you're
it.
more than welcome. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everyone for listening today, and we will see you all next time.